Your property tax bill just doubled. You didn't get a notice. You didn't get a vote. It just happened. And when you call to complain, they'll tell you it's necessary. They'll tell you it's temporary. They'll tell you there's no other choice. They're lying. There was a choice decades ago when politicians promised pensions they couldn't fund, when they borrowed money they couldn't repay, when they kicked the math down the road and hoped someone else would deal with it. That someone is you. A max. And today I'm showing you the 7 U.S. states that are mathematically dead. They just don't know it yet. States where pension funds are 40% empty, where debt exceeds 25% of the entire economy, where the only way out is to bleed you dry through taxes or collapse completely. By minute 8, you'll know if your state is on the list. By minute 12, you'll understand why selling your house now might be the only way to save your equity. And by minute 15, you'll know exactly which states are safe and how to get there before everyone else figures it out. Subscribe, because when this becomes obvious, it'll be too late to move. Let me show you what state bankruptcy actually looks like. It doesn't start with an announcement. It starts with a pension fund realizing it's $139 billion short, and the only place to get that money is your property. It starts with vacancy rates hitting 25% in downtown office buildings, buildings that used to generate $2 billion in annual property taxes, now generating 0. It starts with $1.8 trillion in commercial real estate loans maturing in 2026. Loans that can't be refinanced because the buildings are worth 40% less than the debt. And when those loans default, when those buildings get handed back to banks, when property tax revenue evaporates, the state comes for you. This isn't 2008. This is 2008, plus the Great Depression, multiplied by decades of accumulated debt that never got resolved. And it starts at the state level, where the math has already failed, but nobody's announced it yet. Let's start with number 7, except I'm not calling it number 7, because this isn't a list, this is a body count. Kentucky. Imagine you're a teacher in Louisville. You've worked 30 years. You were promised a pension of $45,000 annually. You earned it. But Kentucky's pension system, funded at 45.4%. Translation, dot. For every dollar they promised you, they have 45 cents. The state owes $43.7 billion in unfunded pension liabilities against a state GDP of $247 billion. That's 17.7% of the entire state economy dedicated to pension debt. That doesn't have the money to pay it. 418,000 active and retired public employees expecting pensions. The math doesn't work. Kentucky can't cut benefits without violating constitutional protections. Can't raise taxes enough to close the gap without driving out the remaining taxpayers. Can't grow its economy fast enough to outrun the obligation. Kentucky's general fund revenue, $14 billion annually. Pension obligations, $3.2 billion per year, just to stay current. That's 23% of the state budget before a single road gets paved. When the next recession hits and state revenues drop 15 to 20%, Kentucky faces a choice: default on pensions or stop providing basic services. And here's the kicker. 35% of Kentucky's budget comes from Washington. Federal transfers. When federal budgets tighten during the crash, that money disappears. Kentucky loses revenue from both ends simultaneously. Property taxes? Expect increases of 20 to 30% within 3 years. Home values. They'll crater as people flee rising taxes and declining services. Your equity at risk from both sides. Falling values and rising tax burden. What do you do if you're in Kentucky? Simple. Leave. Sell your property now while there are still buyers. Move liquid assets, bank accounts, investments out of Kentucky-based institutions that'll face runs when the crisis becomes obvious. If you're receiving a Kentucky pension, assume it gets cut 30 to 40% within 5 years. But Kentucky, that's just the warm-up. New Jersey, pension system funded at 41.8%, worse than Kentucky. $211 billion in total debt against a GDP of $721 billion. That's 28.6% debt to GDP ratio, among the highest in America. But the real crisis? The pension shortfall. $111 billion in unfunded liabilities. New Jersey already has the highest property taxes in America. Average point, $9,284 annually. And they can't raise them further without accelerating the exodus that's already happening. New Jersey lost 70,000 residents in 2023 alone. Every person who leaves takes their tax base with them, while leaving behind pension obligations that don't disappear. The doom loop. High taxes drive out residents, which reduces revenue, which forces higher taxes on remaining residents, which drives out more residents. New Jersey entered that loop in 2018. It's accelerating. Property taxes will increase 25 to 35% over the next 3 years, regardless of home value changes. Your home equity, getting destroyed by tax burden, even if nominal values hold. What do? Sell, now. If you can't sell, prepare for strategic default when your property tax bill exceeds your mortgage payment, which is coming for middle-class homeowners. Number 5 on the body count, Connecticut. $78.3 billion in unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities against a GDP of $325 billion. That's 24% of the entire state economy dedicated to debt that doesn't have funding. Connecticut's pension funded at 47.5%. More than half of promised benefits don't have money behind them. The state lost population for 5 consecutive years. And here's where it gets interesting. Connecticut relies heavily on wealthy residents, concentrated in Fairfield County, the hedge fund and finance executives. The top 1% of earners pay 42% of Connecticut's income tax. When those individuals leave, which they're doing, the entire state budget collapses. Connecticut implemented income tax increases, mansion taxes, corporate tax hikes, trying to close the gap. It's not working. Every tax increase drives more high earners to Florida, Texas, other no-income tax states. Connecticut is experiencing tax-based destruction in real time. Property values, stagnant or declining for a decade. The median home price in Hartford, $200,000, down from $235,000 in 2007. That's 18 years of deflation, while taxes increased 40%. Owners are trapped in homes they can't sell, while paying taxes that keep rising. What do? If you're in Connecticut's top income brackets, you're the tax base the state is hunting. Leave. Relocate to Florida or Texas, establish residency properly. Connecticut aggressively audits people claiming to have moved. If you're middle class and own property, sell while you can. Connecticut real estate is entering a death spiral. But those three, they're the opening act. Hawaii. Geographic isolation, combined with economic dependency on tourism, makes it extraordinarily vulnerable. $29.6 billion in unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities, against a GDP of $102 billion. That's 29% of state economy dedicated to unfunded obligations. Hawaii's pension system, funded at 52.7%. But that number is deceptive. It assumes 7% annual returns on investments, returns that won't materialize during the crash. When reality hits and returns average 3 to 4%, the funded ratio collapses to 35 to 40%. The state economy depends on tourism, which contracts 40 to 50% during recessions. When mainland Americans are unemployed and struggling, Hawaiian vacations disappear. Cost of living in Hawaii, 88% above the national average. Housing costs, 200% above average. When recession hits and incomes drop, Hawaii residents can't afford to live there, but they also can't afford to leave. Moving from Hawaii to the mainland? $8,000 to $15,000 per family. What do you do? If you live in Hawaii and you're not wealthy enough to weather a multi-year depression, leave now. Sell property while tourism is still functioning. Once tourism collapses, there are no buyers. If you work in tourism or hospitality, understand your job disappears first and longest when recession hits. Number 3 on the body count, Illinois, the poster child for state-level insolvency. $317 billion in total debt against a GDP of $1.06 trillion. Pension system funded at 42.4%, one of the worst in America. Unfunded pension liabilities, $139 billion. Chicago, which drives Illinois' economy, is collapsing. The city lost 260,000 residents between 2010 and 2023. Commercial real estate vacancy in downtown Chicago, period. 24%. The city has $42 billion in debt of its own, separate from state obligations. Illinois has the second worst credit rating of any state, just above junk status. The state pays higher interest rates than most corporations to borrow money. Property taxes in Illinois, brutal and getting worse. Cook County property taxes increased 35% between 2010 and 2023. Expect another 30 to 40% increase over the next 5 years. The exodus is accelerating. Illinois lost 344,000 residents between 2020 and 2024. That's a small city worth of taxpayers leaving while pension obligations stay constant. Illinois faces constitutional protections on pensions that prevent the state from reducing benefits. The state constitution explicitly prohibits pension cuts. That means Illinois can't fix its problem without bankruptcy, which would require federal intervention. That isn't coming. What do you do? If you live in Illinois, especially the Chicago area, understand you're in the worst positioned state in America. Sell property immediately. Values will crater within 3 years as tax increases accelerate. If you receive an Illinois pension, you're facing the largest benefit cuts in American history. Plan for 50% reductions or complete default. If you're young and mobile, leave. There's no upside to staying. Number 2, California. California is too big to fail, except it's failing anyway. The state has $541 billion in total debt against a GDP of $3.9 trillion. That's 13.8% debt to GDP, manageable on paper. But the real crisis is hidden in pension obligations and deferred infrastructure maintenance. CalPERS. The state pension system is funded at 71%. Sounds better than other states until you realize it manages $477 billion in assets against $674 billion in liabilities. That $197 billion shortfall is larger than most states' entire budgets. And CalPERS assumes 6.8% annual returns. When the crash hits and returns go negative, the funded ratio collapses. California lost population for 3 consecutive years. Nearly 700,000 residents left between 2020 and 2023. The people leaving, high earners. The top 1% of California taxpayer pay 50% of state income tax. Every wealthy resident who leaves for Texas or Florida destroys California's revenue model. The state depends heavily on capital gains tax from tech wealth. When stock markets crash and tech valuations collapse, California loses 30 to 40% of revenue overnight. That happened in 2001. That happened in 2008. It's happening again in 2026. Commercial real estate in San Francisco, catastrophic. Office vacancy, 36%. Property values have dropped 41% since 2019. The city's budget depends on property taxes that are evaporating as buildings get handed back to lenders. What do? If you're a high earner in California, you're the tax base the state is targeting. Leave before they trap you. California aggressively audits people claiming to have relocated. If you own commercial real estate, sell immediately or prepare for default. If you own residential property in coastal cities, sell now while foreign buyers still exist. If you own a business, relocate to Nevada, Texas, or Arizona. And number 1, New York. The most vulnerable state in America because it's the most dependent on a single industry, finance, that faces existential AI disruption. The state has $411 billion in total debt against a GDP of $2.1 trillion. Pension obligations. $520 billion in unfunded liabilities. But the real crisis is New York City, which generates 60% of state tax revenue. Manhattan commercial real estate? Catastrophic. Office vacancy hit 23% in 2024 and continues rising. Companies are giving back space or not renewing leases. The return to office mandate failed. Remote work is permanent. Wall Street is eliminating 40 to 50% of white-collar positions through AI automation. Those jobs paid $150,000 to $400,000 annually and generated massive income tax revenue. They're disappearing permanently. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all implementing aggressive automation programs. New York City's budget, $110 billion annually. Property taxes from commercial real estate fund a huge portion. When office buildings are 40% vacant and their assessed values drop 50%, the city faces immediate revenue collapse. New York lost 550,000 residents between 2020 and 2024. The pension crisis is deceptive. New York's pension is funded at 94.5%, but that assumes 5.9% annual returns. During a crash where markets drop 40%, that funded ratio collapses to 60 to 65%. Suddenly, New York faces $80 billion in unfunded liabilities it can't pay. What do you do? If you're in New York's financial sector, your job is at higher risk than you think. Update your resume. Have exit options. If you're a high earner, leave before the state implements wealth taxes or exit taxes. Both are being discussed. If you own commercial real estate in Manhattan, sell immediately or prepare for default. If you own residential property in NYC, sell now while there are still buyers. If you own a business, relocate to states with lower costs and growing populations. New York's death spiral is accelerating. Every state on this list shares common characteristics. Unfunded pension liabilities exceeding 15% of state GDP. Population loss accelerating since 2020. Dependence on industries facing AI, disruption or economic contraction. Inability to raise taxes without driving out remaining tax base. State bankruptcy means your property taxes double while services disappear. It means your pension gets cut 40 to 60%, regardless of legal protections. It means your property values crater as people flee and buyers disappear. The crash is coming in 2026, when $1.8 trillion in commercial real estate loans mature and can't be refinanced. States dependent on property tax revenue will see immediate budget collapse. States with unfunded pensions will face margin calls from pension systems demanding cash that doesn't exist. This isn't speculation. The math has already failed. We're just waiting for someone to announce it. What everyone needs to do to diversify your assets geographically. Don't keep everything in one state's banks or real estate. If you live in one of these 7 states and you're mobile, leave. If you're not mobile, prepare for dramatically higher taxes and reduced services. If you receive a government pension from any of these states, assume 40 to 50% benefit cuts and plan accordingly. If you own property, understand your equity is at risk from both falling values and rising tax burden. Consider selling while there are still buyers. If you own a business, relocate to stable states with growing populations. Utah, Idaho, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, North Carolina. If you're young and building a career, choose your location strategically. Don't accept jobs in states that are mathematically insolvent. The collapse starts at the state level. By the time it becomes obvious nationally, you'll already be trapped. The time to move is now, while you still can. 7 states, hundreds of billions in unfunded obligations, millions of residents who don't realize their property taxes, pensions, and home equity are about to be destroyed. The math has already failed. We're just waiting for reality to catch up. I'm Max. The collapse is baked in. The only question is whether you're positioned to survive it. If you want to know which states are actually safe and why, drop a comment. Subscribe. Because understanding which domino falls first is the difference between getting trapped and getting out. The game is rigged, but now you know where it collapses first.